Welcome to Newark on Newark. My name is Tehsuan Glover, and today I am here with Catherine Wilson, CEO of the United Way of Essex and Hudson.
It used to be Essex and West Hudson. Now it's United Way of Greater Newark.
Of Greater Newark.
Yeah.
The United Way of Greater Newark. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, my pleasure. There's been so much going on, obviously, in this global pandemic that we're all experiencing. And one of the areas of great interest is education. And as we're now, leading back into the school year, whether schools are doing in-class learning or remote learning or some hybrid or whatever the approach, different schools and school districts are taking, it's become incredibly obvious some of the weaknesses that our traditional systems have had and sustained over the course of recent history, but it's also going to show the difficulty in pivoting and making adjustments in a way that is sustainable and effective for educating our children. And one of the things that we've become more and more aware and sensitive to is the holistic approach to education. Comprehensively, how do you, the term I believe is teaching the whole child, academically, emotionally, physically, and with this pandemic, that's been something that's been highlighted, like just how much of those services we depend on schools for, and now what does it look like if children aren't returning back to school, or if they're not returning back to school, throughout the week. The days that they're on in school, how are those gaps being filled, whether it be the food that they would normally have in school or counseling or whatever things. Can we talk about a little bit first of all, the financial impact that this is having on families? If children can't return to school, what does that look like in the home?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the home, you've got a parent who, if they're working, now they've got to juggle working either at home with their child and being responsible for helping to educate their child. Or maybe you've got a parent who they're part of the workforce that's actually going out and risking, their health for the sake of others. And so whether that's they're in the grocery store, they're in the hospital, whatever the case may be, now you've got an issue where you've got a child or children at home who may not have the supervision of an adult who not only do they need to be educated, but they just need to be basically supervised. Right. And so the financial impact for families is having to choose, is there childcare available? And can I afford to pay for that, right? And if not, can I call on grandma or grandpa or auntie or, my neighbor down the street who, we can do some informal pod type thing and get together, because the economic impact is a huge issue. And I think it's one that we talk about in Newark a lot, but we sort of overlook the details of that, right? So, when you think about Newark as a whole, over 70% of residents in Newark are what we call asset poor, which means they don't even have $1,000 saved for an emergency, right? So think about now, you don't even have your own personal safety net. Right. You've got to figure out, how do you manage your job, how do you juggle that and educate your child? And you and I both know that, you work in a grocery store and you say, well, I have to take care of my child. Right. It's your job or your child, right? Like there's no alternative for you. So it's putting a tremendous impact. The baseline impact is the economic impact, and then there's other impacts on top of that. Right.
So speaking of, other impacts, academically, over the end of the last school year, and students who were in some version of summer school, one of the findings was that it's the change from in-school learning to virtual learning had a great impact on just how children were able to retain information, comprehend, fulfill assignments in a timely manner and whatnot. And there are a lot of, not to word it as if it's about the children's capacity or capability, But in terms of the resources that are allotted and afforded, there was a really significant shift. What was once, a classroom where all of the tools and resources were made available, and when I say all, take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
But where there were resources, the virtual learning, remotely changed everything.
That's right.
And so a lot of the students aren't performing the way they used to perform. It's not about their academic prowess or intellect or ability.
That's right.
It's just the whole environment is different now.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So what are your thoughts on how we approach, or at the very least, what considerations need to be made about the academic performance?
Yeah. So I think, when you talk about academic performance and sort of describing and what you were talking about, I think just a basic understanding of what happens in a school and in a classroom that impacts a child's academic performance, right? So if you think about it, pedagogy is the art of teaching, right? When you think about it, we all learn differently.
Right.
All students learn differently.
Right.
To your point, it's not necessarily an intellect deficit or capacity. It's just different styles of learning, right? So for me, for example, I need to hold it and see it and read it, right? For another kid, they need to see it on the visual. They need group learning. They need individual learning. This shift to remote learning, into this, what we call this virtual world.
Right.
The baseline issue is not every child has access to the technology, right? We have this huge digital divide. In Newark, in our region, and across our country, we know that. So that's the number one academic challenge is, do you even have the technology, right, to do the remote learning? Right. Secondly, with remote learning, to your point, school is also about socialization, right? School is about, checking in with my friends to see, okay, you know what, we have this work assignment, we have this group project. Again, learning styles are different, checking in with teachers. There's so much that happens during a school day that we're not getting at home.
Right.
Not to anybody's fault, kind of to your point, but it's just the environment that we're in, right? So I also think about it in terms of adulthood, right? For those of us who shifted our work towards home, we may be as productive and we may be even more productive, but the way in which we work and we wrap our minds around that is very different than when we're in the office.
For sure.
The same goes for academics.
Yeah.
Right? So if I'm learning math, but I'm not in the classroom and I can't see it on the board or raise my hand and ask questions, right? Or my parent's not necessarily 100% focused on what I'm doing the way my teacher is, that's going to have an academic impact for me.
And there's no individual teachers or schools may have different approaches and have some, leniency or, understanding or some cushion. But generally speaking, the test is the test. Whether you progress to the next grade or not is based on measures that are not taking into consideration the world that we're currently living in. So there's a difficulty in understanding what students are going through, because if I'm at work, my boss is having the same experience I'm having at home and at work and with our vendors or our clients or whatever the company may be doing. But at school, it's not the same.
That's right.
It's just not the same.
That's right. Because there's a certain, expectation and standard that we have. Right? We measure a child's success, we measure a teacher's success, we measure a school district's success on literacy rates, the ability of a child to pass a math test, standardized math test, at the end of the third grade, fourth grade, sixth grade, high school, right? In the middle of a global pandemic, those don't go away, right? The child either learns how to do math or the child doesn't. The child either is on track to read on grade level or the child's not, right? And let's take a step back and also look at the fact that even before the pandemic in Newark has made significant gains over the last 5 years academically. We're graduating more kids from high school. More of our kids are going to college, or at least getting that option to go to college, right? Or trade, or whatever the case may be. But we still have students who, even before being in a pandemic, were behind. Right? For whatever the reason. Again, not a lack of intellect, right? Lack of resources, lack of even just books, you know,
Mhm.
in the classroom, in the school library, things like that. Now you've shifted that to the remote. The expectation is still, even if you were behind before the pandemic,
Right.
you're still going to be, you know,
Right.
tested at the
Right.
same standard
Right.
remotely. And by the way, even if you don't have a Chromebook and Wi-Fi at
Right.
home,
Right. Right.
these are sort of the
It's amazing. We did a poll. The New York Times did a poll recently on whether families think that students should be provided, like every student should be provided a laptop, Chromebook, you know, a device, and 91% agreed that it should be provided. It really kind of speaks to just generally in terms of our educational system in the country. Teachers are teaching the same way that they learned 30 years prior, you know, and it's not down to the teachers, but the system, the framework is still the same. Textbooks, you know, pen and paper, you know, pencils, like all of these tools are incredibly antiquated in the world that we currently occupy. Not that you shouldn't, not that books are out of date, but access to information is a very different idea in 2020 than it was in 1990.
well, this is about equity,
Right.
right? So let's talk about that.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the equity,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're right. In many districts, kids are still learning with books and paper and pencils the way we learned
Right.
30 years ago,
Right.
right? And in some, and I would argue, same with 100 years
Mhm.
ago, right?
Mhm.
That
Right.
system hasn't really changed.
Right.
But in some districts, they get their laptop in kindergarten,
Mhm.
and they're in it, and they get that laptop every year,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
My child, if my child goes to, I don't have children, but if my child went to a private school,
Mhm.
the
Right.
expectation would be every year they get a laptop,
Absolutely.
right? This is an equity issue,
Mm-hmm.
and not only is it an equity issue, it's also a workforce issue.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because think about it. So we have these anticipations in the social sector around breaking the cycle of poverty and lifting people out of poverty and supporting families, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you go back to the education, and it's a system-wide issue, I'm not saying it's just a Newark issue, it's a system-wide issue, right? Around equity. Our kids aren't learning on computers the way other kids are learning,
Absolutely.
right? So when they go to college, they're behind the 8 ball.
Right.
Right? When I went to, I didn't have in high school. I didn't have access to the internet.
Mhm.
Some of my peers did. Some did not. So when I went to college, I had to learn that. I had to teach
Right,
myself that.
right.
Right? I was now. I obviously quickly picked it up,
Mhm.
but our kids are already behind the 8 ball. Right?
Mhm.
Now we want them to go into the fastest growing
Mhm.
careers,
Mhm.
sectors, right?
Right.
That are all technology based.
Mhm.
Think about it.
Right.
All of it.
Right.
Right? Even from a United Way perspective, we used to go to a company and hand them a piece of paper and say, we're asking for your donation.
Correct.
What do we do right now?
Right.
We make them log on and make a pledge.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this,
Right.
right? It's all all digital.
Right.
So I say all that to say that we want the best for our kids. We have to give them the best in order for them to achieve the best,
Indeed.
right? And it's going to take all of us to do that.
Yeah.
It's not just the district.
Right. Right.
Right, because so many people have said, you know, well, what do you think about the district, and what do you think about their plans? It's like, I think the district made a great decision around public health, right? This is about public health.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to die from the
Right,
coronavirus,
right,
right? Nobody wants to get sick and go through that,
Right.
right? And we know the impact on our black and brown communities
Mhm.
that this is having, right?
Mhm.
The district made a public health decision.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we also have to understand the consequences for our kids and our families as a result of this public health issue.
Yeah.
The district made a decision, but it's the public health issue
Right.
that is the actual issue,
Right. Right.
right? And so I think ultimately, you know, we really need to look at how do we all come together and build the better system, right? So back to your point around, you know, technology and the way that we learn, it's gonna take all of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna take Audible coming in and saying,
Mhm.
every kid gets,
Right.
whether it's a Kindle, a
Right.
Chromebook, whatever, it's Panasonic, it's
Mhm.
Prudential, and I'm not
Mhm.
saying these companies haven't stepped up, they absolutely
Right.
have. It's gonna take all
But
of us
yeah.
to do that.
Yeah. It's definitely not just down to the district.
That's right.
Right.
And the district, you know, to your earlier point around some of the, you know, the district provides breakfast and lunch, the district provides after school, the
Mhm.
district links parents to, and kids to social service and mental health,
Mhm, mhm.
and the district does a lot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But but they cannot do it all by themselves.
Right.
They cannot do it alone.
Right.
And the same goes for the technology.
Right.
You know?
You know, to that point, in terms of public health and then specifically mental health, you know, it's just another area where there's now a spotlight being shown on the fact that the framework and the resources that have been in place now, they don't have a place to be, because they can't intrude in the home. They can't just barge into your house and provide these services, even though they're necessary and valuable. But, you know, whether it's students or faculty, parents, like, we're all experiencing something that's having a great impact on our psyche, on our emotional health, on our mental health. And it's a really difficult thing to not know how to address a problem that you know is very real and present and isn't going anywhere. Like, it's almost crippling when you know that there's the problem. You know exactly what it is, but you know that you can't approach it the way you used to, and you also don't have anything in place to replace that. You know, children are going to suffer through an awful lot of changes and uncertainties and whatnot, and there just aren't the resources in place as they once were. And not that they were, you know, fantastic and foolproof, you know, previously, but still, you can't just barge into someone's home and give a child the type of, you know, counseling or have the understanding that this is the way to navigate this terrain.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think one of the big issues, sort of, you know, I talk about this a lot around food insecurity, right? It's sort of like all of a sudden people are like, oh my God, we have this food issue, right? It's like, well, this isn't the first time people were food insecure. It's just magnifying.
Right.
It's the same with mental health. We have this issue in our country where we don't want to talk about mental health. Right? We don't want to talk about that. I am very transparent about the fact that I have anxiety. I tell my employees it's okay to have anxiety. I tell them it is okay to talk about your mental health. It is okay to ask for help for your mental health. It is okay to prioritize your mental health, right? And I think we need to start having those conversations in the middle of a pandemic.
For sure.
Because I think that mental health, like any other health issue, is, you know, it's pervasive, right? And we have a lot of people who've been traumatized by racism. We have a lot of people who've been traumatized by living in poverty. Just basic things that all impact your mental health. And so I think first and foremost, we need to get to a place where we can say it's okay to ask for help. That doesn't make me crazy. It doesn't make me weak. It doesn't make me, you know, not capable of doing my job. It just means I need an extra outlet, or I need an extra conversation with a trained professional to kind of help me work through some of this, right? So, to your point, you know, no, we can't have people barging into people's homes saying, you know, your child needs mental health. But I think talking about kids' mental health is super important right now as well. Kids have been isolated from their friends for they have not seen a classroom in 6 months, right? This has been going on since March, 6 months, right? You haven't been in school, you haven't been to your after school, you maybe didn't get to go to summer camp, maybe you're getting to play with your friends in the neighborhood, maybe not, depending, right? And then there's this added stress, the economic stress, the health stress, am I gonna go back to school? So all of the adults are having these conversations trying to figure this out, and we pretend that doesn't have an impact on our kids. They can hear us, they can observe, they know there's some global pandemic going on. And so, you know, again, it's gonna take a coordination of services, of mental health providers to come up with some solutions. You know what? Yes, we need to have mental health, whether it's on the telephone, whether it's through the computer. Not everybody has a computer. Maybe we do it on the telephone. We need to make those services accessible, right? We absolutely need to make them accessible for our parents, and we must make them accessible for our kids. Again, not something that the school district alone can solve. You know?
Before you get out of here, I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk specifically about the United Way and the work that you guys have been doing. So can you just kind of update us on what's been going on in the past, 6 months.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So, in middle March, we all went remote, and immediately set up a community COVID fund to support, the needs of our parents and our families in the community. And we, as United Way of Greater Newark, we cover Newark and then 12 other surrounding municipalities. So it's Newark, it's Irvington, it's the Oranges, it's Maplewood and all that. Primarily, a lot of what we've been doing is in Newark. So, huge thanks to our donors, Prudential, Victoria, Healthcare Foundation, Panasonic, really stepped up. We raised $4.8 million for the community. City of Newark, major partner.
It's amazing.
Amazing. The mayor's leadership on, getting help to small businesses, renters, nonprofits. So we were able to assist on supporting small businesses, including this one. Trying to keep the small business community afloat.
Right.
In July, we held a virtual 5K to support a program we initiated to adopt families in need of diapers and formula. So another huge issue around WIC. Families who are WIC eligible, the state has been very slow to get electronic debit cards. They still send these antiquated paper checks. You got to get to the store. If they don't have the formula you need, you sacrifice the rest of your payment. You can't buy diapers. It's a mess, right? So we just said, how do we sort of help families help families? Had a 5K, raised a few $1,000s for that. So we're, supporting the direct ship of formula and diapers for families. And then this food security issue, just this morning I was talking to Carlos over at the Community Food Bank and bringing and convening our partners together to really figure out, how do we create a better coordination, not a system? How do we create we have enough systems. How do we create a better coordination of what we're all trying to do, which is to help feed those who are not captured by the safety net, right? Like our undocumented neighbors, our youth who are aging out of foster care. So that's what United Way has been doing. We're getting ready to kick off our fall campaign. So of course we're out there raising additional funding. And hopefully being able to provide the district some additional funding on this digital divide to get more laptops, to get more hotspots for Wi-Fi, and really just helping identify and sort of plugging in where the need is.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
That's absolutely fantastic.
We have a wonderful team. We certainly, it takes every single one of us every day doing it.
Yeah.
So I can't thank them enough either. The team at United Way has just been amazing.
Yeah. How can folks support?
So go to our website. Okay. Go to our website, sign up to volunteer, to donate. Some people have started making ongoing donations, $25 a month. You can designate it. I want my money to go for food. I want my money to buy diapers. You can also sign up to volunteer. We're still, food pantry is still looking for volunteers to help pass out food and things like that. So absolutely. Yeah.
This is wonderful. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can't wait. We'll do this again.
Oh, we have to do this again.
Awesome.
Yeah.